Hey guys, before the video begins, I wanted to share something with you that I'm pretty excited about. I've always loved narrating stories on this channel, but sometimes I've wanted to post something shorter that I didn't want to disappear. So I was pretty excited when I found out about Amino's new story feature, and the fact that what I post there doesn't just disappear like other places. So I've actually partnered with Amino to create some of my very own stories. And if you check out my profile, you'll find some really creepy stories waiting for you right there. Click the link in the description or pinned YouTube comment or search for Amino apps to download Amino. Find my stories by searching for Mortis Media, and make sure you follow me and click the bell to know when I'm posting new videos. Just like YouTube, every time you watch my videos, you'll be supporting me. So, if you like my videos, this is a simple, free way to keep me creating. I can't wait to see you all there. This happened a long time ago. I'd say this happened when I was around 11 years ago in fact. My family and I were on holiday in Spain, in a city quite close to Barcelona. We went to a very big and luxurious resort with a ton of sports fields, from basketball to soccer. It took up a lot of space, and it had really tall fences around the perimeter to make sure no one could get in at night. To give you some perspective, I think they had 8 soccer fields, 4 basketball courts, 2 rugby pitches, and probably some other stuff too. During the day, all of the fields were full of people playing sports, and it was always a ton of fun there. But at night, the perimeter closes. I stayed late with a friend. I don't remember his name, so we'll call him Brian. Brian and I didn't want to go home yet, so we stayed a bit longer to shoot penalties on the soccer field. Eventually they closed the fence, but since we were too far away from them to see us and vice versa, we only found out that the fence was closed when we tried to leave. This was already scary. It was a huge unlit place in a foreign country, surrounded by big fences. After freaking out for a little, we decided we didn't want to get into trouble, so we set out to follow the fence to look for holes through which we could escape, instead of calling for help. After a solid 20 minutes, we find a hole. But it's not connected to the resort, but to a dark forest. We figured it wasn't a large forest, and that it would be safe given that it was right next to the resort. We go through the hole and begin crossing the forest. A mere 5 minutes later, we enter a large, bare spot with an old, damaged, graffitied concrete shed. We avoided it as best we could, but soon we heard some glass bottles moving around in the shed. Out walks this old man. He stares at us for 10 seconds. We are paralyzed by fear. He looks deranged, like someone who had been homeless for the larger part of his life. His clothes were ripped, hair and beard very long and disgusting. He even had a limp. He coughs, which wakes up another man in the shed. This looks exactly like Charles Patashik from Breaking Bad. They start to slowly walk in our direction, speaking to us in Spanish. We slowly back up. They see this, and they charge. They start running, screaming, and throwing stuff at us. We are running for our lives. The forest is pitch black. We can barely see ahead of us, let alone see if there's an end to this seemingly infinite forest. After about 10 minutes of running, we reach the edge of the forest, We were on a small town road next to a huge cliff. There were no houses, no people, and we were still being chased. We follow the road uphill, finally gaining some ground on the homeless psychopaths. The road ends. The only thing we see is a mansion without any burning lights. We figure it's all or nothing, and we climb their gate and hide in their backyard. The homeless men follow us, but by the time they managed to get in, we were already hidden in some dense, dark bushes. They made quite a bit of noise, which woke up the residents. Out comes a man screaming and looking around his garden. He closely passes by us, but did not see us. He was holding a gun. I didn't get a close look, but I think it was a shotgun, an older one that holds 2 shells. He inevitably spots the homeless men and fired a warning shot into the air. The Charles Pattershik-looking man charges at him, but gets knocked down. He forces the homeless men out of his garden at gunpoint. We fought safe for a second, until we realized we were in a shotgun-wielding man's garden, and that we did not know where the homeless men were. We wait a bit to be sure that the man is asleep, and that the homeless men have left. When we leave, around a half hour later, the men are gone, and the roads are quiet. We follow the same road, but now downhill, and run into a small town. We still have no idea where we are. It has been 3 hours since we left the resort, and we finally realized what just happened and freaked out. After walking for another 10 to 15 minutes, we see a house with people in the living room. We ring the bell and try to ask the way. Most Spanish people don't speak Dutch, and we didn't really speak English all that well. We told her the name of the resort, and she points downhill. This seems like a fairly standard road. We stick closely to the houses and follow the road. I didn't know this at this point, but apparently there was an abandoned slaughterhouse close to the entrance of the resort. We heard Dutch voices from somewhere around the building, so we go in asking directions. Enter a bloody hellhole. Everywhere there's blood. On the floor, on the walls, on the equipment, and even the ceiling. Bloody knives everywhere. It wasn't a very nice experience. The other people run into us as we ask directions. It's a 2-minute walk away. When we finally hit the resort, the staff don't let us in because they don't know if we're residents of the resort. They make us tell them the house of our parents to come and get us. There were still pancakes left when I got back, and I played Pokemon with my brother. My mum gave me €10 for the arcade the next day, which was when my bike got stolen. About 3 months ago, my wife, then fiancé, and I were driving from Oregon to Arizona. We were in a part of Nevada that was in the middle of nowhere. We were on the end of a 70-mile stretch with no cell service at midnight. My wife is a small girl, only 5'1" and 100 pounds. I often joke when I go to see her at work, "Oh, it must be take your child to work day. She's that small." It was my wife's turn to drive at this point, so I was reclined in my seat, out of view, sleeping. She shakes me awake and says, "This guy's been following me on my arse for a while. I don't know what his issue is." I glance behind to see a big F-350, only about 10 feet behind us. I tell her to speed up, figuring he was just wanting us to go faster, but he keeps the same distance from us at all times. All of a sudden, he shoots into the oncoming lane, overtakes us, and then proceeds to slow in front of us, bringing his and our speed to only 10 miles an hour. She backs off a considerable distance when he slams on his brakes and starts opening his door. At this point, I sit up all the way. I am a pretty big guy, and I roll my window down. When he spots me, he slams his door shut and takes off. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but I feel that the guy didn't see me. He would have definitely tried to take my wife. It shook us up pretty badly. And at the next gas station, we found the attendant and called it in. Luckily, I got his plate numbers. And that's why you don't drive in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. You never know who is out there. This was probably around 4 or 5 years ago. 4 friends and I had been talking about ghost experiences and such, when we decided to try and find some places to go investigate for fun. A quick bit of research revealed some stories about a place called Old House Road. Claims of a witch, green lights from the ground, and a ghost ship that sailed over the beach and anchored. We decided to take the 3-hour drive to go visit. The road itself was probably 1.5 miles, maybe 2. Gravel road, surrounded by grass and weeds, and plants at least 6 foot tall. It's right by the water, a little private beach. On this road, perhaps 2/3 of the way, is a little old abandoned house, and there was not a single source of light on the whole stretch. So we drove down all the way, noting that it's pretty dark here. We parked by the beach, stepped out, and walked as a group towards the house. We take a couple of turns and such, before we reach a long, straight way to the house. We're walking and talking, searching for things with our flashlight, when someone points out a light in the distance. This light, we all observed, was down near where the house was, but directly in the path. We kept walking, slightly cautious now. This is when we realize that the light is getting closer than we expect. We stop, and the light continues to come closer. It's at this point I observe that it's not like a flashlight or a car light. This is a torch, or a lantern, swaying slowly back and forth as it approaches, and it's not illuminating anything behind it. My friend Jay is the only other one in this group that has experience for searching with things like this. He taps me on the shoulder and whispers, "Shark attack." He meant that the lantern was a distraction, so we both turned around just to see 2 small red lights peering over the tall grass before quickly dropping back down into said grass. At this point, everyone else is transfixed on the light ahead. So me and Jay calmly turned everyone around and said tonight is not the night to be messing with this. We got everyone back into the car calmly before we explained what we'd seen. Once at the car, I decided to step back and see if anything had followed. I walked towards the first turn, where I could still be seen. I heard some movement ahead and said hello, and promptly got hit by a rock. Not hard though, it was on my knee. I was more confused than anything. I received another rock, and this time it was to my chest. I got the message. It means get the hell out. So I go back. We all go into the car and decide it's time to return home. It's worth noting that on the drive down the road, we saw absolutely no sign of lights or people, or anything. Just the same empty road we'd taken to get there. We left Old House Road shortly after. At this point, we discussed the fact that we drove 3 hours to spend 15 minutes in one spot. Consensus was, screw that. So we looked for a place that was in our own path home. And boy, did we find something. I will probably never remember the name of the bridge, but I'm sure I could text Jay and find out. The place was an overpassing bridge in the middle of nowhere, on some side street that was probably 15 miles long. We drive over there, someone reading the claims out to everyone. The story goes that there was a bride who ran from her arranged marriage on her wedding day, running over the bridge, stopping and jumping off in her wedding gown, and dying. Neat, right? Coupled with that was very factual and documented evidence of KKK activity in the 70s. They'd hung many people on this road, hanging off trees right next to it. So, not cool. What were the problems, you ask? They say that if you parked your car under said overpass, you could hear the bride fall onto your car, see handprints on your mirrors, but see no corpse. They also claimed that if you parked there, your battery would die and car would become inoperable. Tow companies came out a lot apparently, and further down the road, people claimed seeing dead men hanging in the trees. We go down the road, and this overpass is nestled neatly in the lowest part of the valley, made by 2 moderately sized hills. You can see the top of another side around the bridge. Not very intimidated, we made the decision not to stop under the bridge, for we were all hours from the house, and just decided to screw that. We drive under it and saw nothing. It was very uneventful, so we continued down the road. I can't explain how dark this road was. No streetlights, no signs, no anything. Just dense woods on either side of the street. As unsettling as that was, we found a little wider dirt shoulder and turned around maybe a third of the way down the road. Back under the bridge we go. Pass number 2 was interesting. We go down back the hill and past the bridge. As we do, the car lights are very noticeably dim and then come back. Everyone saw it. Intrigued now, we U-turn and like typical young people, we drive down once more. This time the car audibly stutters and we all feel it. Well damn. We U-turn, cross the 4th time, and the car radio shuts off and the car almost completely stalls. This is the point where we should call it. It's close to the witching hour. We've already had an encounter and the car is threatening to die on us. But alas, we're dumb. So onwards we go. We drive, and as we're approaching the bridge, we see headlights on the other side. So we stop, feeling slightly compelled to. This is where it gets weird. We had a couple of people recording at this point, and we all are very distinctly pointing out 2 pairs of headlights descending the opposite hill. 4 in total. This man is not wearing a uniform or badge, but is driving a local police vehicle. He rolls down his window and stops. No blue lights. He tells us that they've been monitoring our traffic patterns since we'd been there, and told us it was illegal to be driving back and forth on this road like that. Top that all off, he just seemed abnormal. His facial expression was fairly locked in place. He spoke very slowly and deliberately, and it was just off-putting. I apologize, but it's hard to put into words. It just felt wrong. Regardless, he told us to leave. and then watched us 3-point turn and then go away. He drove off, with us behind him until the stop sign. He turned right, and GPS told us to follow him. When we do, he's gone. We were very shaken. We stop at a gas station for snacks and nicotine. We exchange a review or two of the 3 videos recorded and point out the distinct 4 lights. But the back 2 that disappeared when they reached the bridge weren't connected like headlights, almost like it were 2 motorcycles. If I ever get the chance, I'll get someone who might have the video and upload them. But that's a good one. It got to us, and we didn't go out like that again. But I do joke around about going to Old House Road again sometime. My family camped in the same place every year. Awesome campsites. And it was surrounded by miles and miles of forest. Anyway, a couple of kilometers from the main area, we find this barbed wire fence. And being boys, we had to get over it. But at the time it was far too tall. So we dug under it with my father's old tactical shovel. A fold-out shovel with a blade in one side. Anyway, we finally squeeze under, and we make our way into the forest. We walk for about 20 minutes, and when we don't see anything, we stumble upon a river. It was the middle of summer, and the river was running low. So we climb down the bank and decide to follow the river, because we had nothing better to do. We follow the river for a while, until we come across a strange sight. A very old, very rusty Volkswagen Beetle, half buried in the bank, partially sunk into the riverbed. The front end was punched in, and the seats were ripped apart, and all the glass was missing. The weirdest thing was that there was this giant hole punched through the roof. The metal was bent outwards, like something had punched through from the inside of the car. The doors were rusted shut, but with our handy pocket knives and my dad's old tactical shovel, we ripped over the driver's side door. The other was sunk into the muck and inaccessible, and inside there was one leather shoe, still tied, just sitting there. It was super creepy, and thinking about it now, I'm pretty sure something very messed up happened. But as a kid, it was super cool and creepy. We never told anyone about it, and we returned to see it every year when we went camping, bringing our friends along and such. The last time we went to see the car, it was pretty much gone, totally sunken into the mud. The creepiest thing though, honestly, was that there were no roads for miles around, and it was all forest. Something I constantly pondered was how the hell it got into the riverbed in the first place, and where the hell the original driver went. I was in Denali National Park 2 years ago, with my now wife and 2 other friends. If you aren't familiar with it, it is a trailless wilderness. That means that there aren't trailheads or marked trails. And if you find social or game trails, you are encouraged to avoid them to keep the wilderness as pristine as possible. You give a backcountry permit to a unit, which is a large division of the park and has a limited number of campers in it. You get on the bus that goes to one of the roads through the park and drops you off when it is going through access to your assigned unit. Then it drives away and you're in the middle of nowhere. It is amazing and intimidating at the same time. Anyway, we backpack for 2 amazing days and have yet to see any wildlife other than the local ptarmigans. On the morning of the last night, the others are drinking coffee, and we are preparing to break camp. I'm looking down in the river valley that our campsite has a view of. We hadn't seen other humans for 48 hours, and I think I see some campers hiking through the brush in the distance. I call out, and the hikers turn out to be a bull moose who pops his head up and looks at us. We then start watching him, and he walks along the river and slowly makes his way towards our camp. "He's not coming here," I say to the group. Well, he was. He climbed the hill and walked right into our campsite. We gave him a wide berth as he approached, as moose are the only animals you run from in Denali, as they can be aggressive. He froze and eyeballed us for a while, then continued up the side of the mountain. It was scary as hell, but he was a majestic beast. Anyway, it starts pouring on us as we are finishing breaking camp, and we decide to save some time by following a game trail for a bit, as we were soaked and cold. This saved us a lot of time bushwhacking through alders and whatnot. Well, we round a corner, and the trail comes to a dead end, in what was the remains of a bear kill site. The bones of a moose, flattened down brush, old scat. Let me tell you, that's an unnerving feeling. We freeze, the blood drains out of our faces, and we look at each other and instantly agree to double back a bit and start our bushwhacking again to get out of Dodge. It was an epic trip, and I highly recommend it if you have any backpacking experience. If not, camp near the ranger station is also nice to do some day hikes. My father is an avid outdoorsman, and when I was a kid I tagged along. One night we were out driving to a hunting site in the middle of nowhere. We were driving down an old road, and we hadn't passed another car in quite a while. We were coming up on a pasture, and we could see a perfect circle of individual blue lights sitting out there on the ground, in the middle of this grazing pasture. It's hard to say how big the circle was, but I'd say it was at least the size of an average house. It was very unusual just in itself. We were like, what the hell is that? Then exactly as we drive by, all of the lights turn off in a sequence around the circle. It was chilling. My dad doesn't get scared or edgy very easily. He immediately took us home a different way than we'd come, and we didn't drive back that way. He knew who owned the land and called the guy, and he had no idea what it was and was just as weirded out as we were. On another night, we were driving back from hunting in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. As we were going along, we come upon this woman walking along the side of the road. Every hair I have stood on end, and there was just something not right about the situation, besides the obvious. It was an older woman dressed in old-time clothes. That wasn't all the crazy though, because we were in a very rural part of West Texas, with a large population of Mennonites, as well as country people who did dress that way. I could tell my dad was put off, but he was not going to just let some lady wander desolate roads in the middle of the night. He pulls up to the woman, but she keeps walking. He rolls down my window and asks her if she needs any help. She didn't reply in any way whatsoever. It was as if we weren't there at all. It was scary as hell. He kept trying, but there was nothing, so he took off in a hurry. Finally, on another occasion, we were out in the woods. I think we could have been checking traps and walking to a hunting blind on a lease. Anyway, we were walking along through the woods, and I just happened to look to my right, and there was a clearing through the trees that went on for a ways, almost like a path. If you spent a lot of time in the woods, I'm sure you'd know what I mean. So I look out to my right, and I swear I saw a big hairy ape walk across that clearing in maybe 1 or 2 steps. That was the scariest thing. I still question whether it happened, or I hallucinated it. I mean, it was that scary and surreal. I was in Ruidoso, New Mexico, about 12,000 feet elevated, just staring at the stars outside my home. I can get lost in the stars for hours. It was about midnight, and I noticed a green glow coming from deep in the forest. Mind you, everything is dark, and everybody is sleeping up here. It would pulsate on and off again. I wanted to check it out, but didn't dare in the night. Must have been at least 20 to 30 yards away. Then time passes, and I see some lights dancing in the sky, moving up and down the side. I started to put my focus on that, then went on for over an hour. They started low and slowly made their way higher. Well, this part, mind you, scared the hell out of me. Out of nowhere, it pulsated a lime green color, so strong I could make out it's an aircraft of some kind. Not your typical aircraft, but an oval one with windows running all around it. It was like the sides were all glass. The crazy thing is, the green glow was the same one I'd seen earlier in the forest. Some time passes, and I'm just sitting there taking it all in, hoping no bear or wild animal comes and attacks me in the night. And above me I see this huge craft. I had my camera on me, ready to take pictures of whatever. But in that moment, I felt like I froze and couldn't move. I'd never seen this craft as well. First, it was all black apart from the red circle-shaped lights on the back. It must have been about 4 to 5 lights. Second, it was moving slow, like hovering at slow speeds. Lastly, it was shaped like a triangle. No lie. It was way too low for an aircraft. And above me, I was shitting bricks. I couldn't even call my folks while I was in awe of whatever it was. I know this sounds highly unlikely, but I wouldn't waste my time sharing this just for the hell of it. This happened 10 years ago. It could have been military, or an exotic aircraft that they're creating, but I really don't know. Nonetheless, I was amazed and terrified seeing it. I was driving home from shopping. My mum was with me. It was somewhat dark in the middle of winter in Minnesota. We're somewhat out in the country, and there are road lights and medians, but not a ton of them. All of a sudden, this giant dog/wolf thing leapt across the road about 25 feet in front of our car. It was a 4-lane road with a median. It made it, landing once on the median and jumping again from there. The car's headlights, as well as the lights of the light pole, didn't penetrate it. It was pure black. It was like a shadow from within. It wasn't a deer. It was far too large for that, and the body shape was that of a wolf, or a large dog. And it wasn't a moose for the same reasons, and definitely not a bear. Whatever it was large enough that the bottom of its chest would have stood above the hood of the Suburban we were in. As teenagers, when we go hang by the river and drink late at night, I stressed that it was a small neighborhood, and where we went, no one else went. I'd bet only the 3 of us knew. That number includes all the kids, including myself, in the neighborhood. Multiple times we all saw, at the same time, something humanoid but distinctly not at the same time, watching us from the edges of the woods near our small clearing. We'd all hear voices as well, not from people living around there, and not a ton specifically, but just voices. One of the oddest happenings was when we were all about 15. We dragged an old couch to that hangout spot. It almost took us 5 hours. We hung out in the woods that night, but we were out until about 2 a.m, heading back to one of our homes to set up a LAN and game a bit. About 3 hours later, someone realized they'd left something back there, and for the hell of it, as dawn was breaking, we all went with them. The couch, which was a sleeper and supremely heavy, was gone. Just gone. No drag marks other than the ones that we'd made, and no signs of a vehicle or anywhere else. How it had managed to disappear in that short time is still a mystery to us to this day. About 10 years ago, I lived in Virginia with my then girlfriend, who was working on an internship there. We're pretty outdoorsy type, and would periodically go to hike in various places around where we lived. I can't remember exactly where it was, to be honest, but we had driven out into the middle of nowhere in order to hike a particular nature reserve. To get there, we drove a long ways down a windy country back road, and then the final bit was on a one-lane dirt road to the trailhead. Driving down the dirt road, there was nothing but pasture land for several miles, some empty, some full of cows. It was rather remote, sparsely populated, and I would guess that we passed perhaps 2 to 3 houses, or their driveways anyway, in total. Probably 1,000 acres per house kind of deal. We hiked, uneventfully, and got in the car to drive back home near sunset. The landscape was such that there were a lot of tiny rolling hills, so we were driving up and down frequently. As we crested one of these hills, we both saw a white 50s-ish farm truck barreling down the road towards us at somewhat of an alarming speed. Given the diminished visibility, and the fact that it was a literally one-lane road with nowhere in sight to pull off, my girlfriend was driving and we were both like, oh crap, that guy's driving really fast and we're gonna be in a lot of trouble. She slowed down in anticipation, and we waited for the truck to arrive. As we waited, we did a couple more up and down the hills while nervously looking for the truck, which had to be on us at any second by this point. Only the truck never arrived. It was the weirdest thing. We both saw it. We were both nervous about it hitting us, and the damn thing just disappeared. We hadn't passed any driveways, and once we realized the truck was gone, I kept my eye out for a driveway, because that would explain it. But nope, nothing. The truck was simply gone. I am normally a logical person, but I have no explanation, other than I think we saw a ghost truck. I worked for the country agriculture department one summer. My co-workers and I drove out to the orchards to put up some insect experiments. Sometimes the locations were pretty far from civilization. This one particular walnut orchard was about an hour away from a very small town. It was scraggly looking, not very well managed, lots of weeds and diseased trees, which made it good for insect research, because there were so many. The trees were big and old. The place put out a very uneasy, creepy feeling. None of us liked visiting that orchard. We always rushed in to change the bug traps and rushed out so we didn't spend any more time than we had to. One day, the three of us are driving to it when we make the final turn into the property. There's a cop car blocking the middle of the road, with a police "do not cross" tape stretched across the dirt road. We park, get out, explain to the officer what we're doing there and ask what's going on. There's a dead body in the orchard. He asks if there's anything we know about it. No, we just got there. He says they're investigating and it might take a week. Fine by us. We called our boss and told him we weren't going back to that place. Here's the kicker. We were late to getting to the orchard that day. Had it been our first stop in the morning like it usually was, we would have stumbled across that body. Or maybe even the event that caused it. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's video. As I mentioned at the start, it would be awesome if you could check out my profile on Amino. You can find the link in the description and as the pinned comment. I would love to have you. I actually have a new story over there now for you to check out if you want a little bit extra after you're done here. So feel free to follow the link and see what it's all about. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. This actually reminded me of a funny story. The story about the guy seeing the lights in the middle of nowhere. There was this time that me and my wife were coming home, and this is in the middle of London, bear in mind. And as we're turning a corner, we look up and we see something in the sky, and we both instantly assume it's a UFO. We get our phones and try taking a picture and zooming in and all of that, but it's still really unclear. And whatever this thing is, it's moving up and at quite a speed. We can't really make out a colour, just the fact that there's something in the sky moving up. And we start getting a little bit worried, thinking it could be aliens. So my wife goes on her phone and within about 2 minutes finds that one of the museums had released a pig-shaped balloon into the atmosphere. A giant pig-shaped balloon, mind you. So that's what it was. We were both freaking out and it was just a big balloon. Anyway, I thought it would be a funny story to end the video on. As I said, if you liked it, don't forget to leave some love and subscribe if you're new and maybe press the bell icon for good measure. But that's it from me, guys. For now, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome. And I'll see you in the next one.